if you hadn't noticed, today, which is when I'm doing this, is Love Your Bookshop Day. You might not be seeing this on Love Your Bookshop Day, but today, Saturday, 9th of October, was Love Your Bookshop Day. So thank you to everybody who showed us a bit of love and bought their books. Today I have quite a meaty selection of books, I have to admit. So I'll give you as much as I can about them. I could talk about almost all of these for, a good long time. I'm not going to. I'm going to. I let you out early. We'll start with this one from Scribner. I think I'm bookending. I've got Scribner at the beginning and at the end of this lot. Into the Rip by Damien Cave, which is non-fiction. It's, I suppose it's classified as memoir. This I picked up and was instantly struck by, well, two things, probably three things. One, his opening premise, or the premise that probably guides this, is his question is, are Australians laid back or rigid? And he's asking this question with in mind the sort of being rules to keep us safe, what we do to keep ourselves safe and to keep others safe. Damien Cave came to set up the New York Times Australian Bureau. Well-known journalist, writes absolutely effortlessly. I mean, this is a wonderful read. When I picked it up, I said, obviously Into the Rips is going to be about, the sea. And it made me think back to before I moved to Australia. I remember David saying to me, if you're coming and you're bringing all your children, I hope they're very good swimmers, because we were going to go surfing and stuff. And I went, oops, they're like me, they swim like knives. So, I rectified that with, they'll love me if they're watching this. Sorry, kids. They all swim very well now, managed to do the necessaries in France before we came. And this is the same kind of narrative. It resonated with me, because I remember thinking about you come to this country, you look at the surf, you look at surfing, you look at these tiny kids who shoot into the water with their surfboards, and they're taking on this element. And this led Cave to think about, how safe really is that? I mean, this, of all the countries, or one of the countries in the world where being safe is not an easy thing to guarantee. So it's not just about him moving to Australia with his wife and two very young children and getting into the nippers. So it is Sydney based, but it really opens out into the whole of Melbourne, and it's probably the comparisons between America and Australia in terms of risk taking. This is what he's interested in, and he illustrates it beautifully with, the beginnings of swim tests, maybe not doing so well, how do we cope with failure? And it led him to do a lot of thinking on the theory, on the philosophy of risk-taking, right from Epicurus to why we want to be happy, pleasure, seeking pleasure, to Blaise Pascal, and sort of the mathematics of probability. And he serves over a lot of material. It's meaty, it's a thinking book, but you have this lovely narrative of how they all do, because you're interested, you're really invested in are his children going to give up? Is he himself, because like all good parents, if your kids are going to go through trials, one of the best ways of keeping everybody sort of more zen about things is if you yourself try to take on something that's a bit difficult. So they all end up taking on the surf. And it's about, somebody I know said, this makes me feel so good about being Australian. And I think that's a lovely thing to say, because one of the conclusions Cave comes to is that there is risk-taking, obviously, in taking on, sending your tiny kids off to surf these monster waves. But it's more about joining in. It's about trust, and particularly, he's not talking about extreme sport. He's talking about the fact that we will surf or join life-saving clubs, not because we want to master the waves, it's because we want to be able to save other lives. So he does go into all of the philosophy of trust, of community, of building. He talks about our schooling, he talks about our education system, he compares it to New York, and boy oh boy do we in Australia come off particularly well. I thought it was fabulous. I really did think it was fabulous. There was an awful lot in it, so it deserves to, for you to plunge back into it. To anybody who's interested in our education system, in our values, and on why we take risks, and also to get that lovely narrative of why anybody would move to this country. Don't talk to me about it. Oops, I've just hit my microphone. He's going to hate me. Next one up. I have told you before, and it is the subject of one of my greatest joys is other people reading and telling me what they're reading, and then I can pop some of these in as a review. Now, Laura, who you all know, we'll get get lots of information from the Dean family. She read this one. It's Lisa Jewell, The Night She Disappeared. Now, she's a crime writer. This comes to us, I'm going to sneak peek, it is Century. I was about to say something. This is from Century, and it's one of in the thriller vein, because I'm not reading quite so many of those at the moment. There's so much to choose from. And Laura says it's an enthralling slow burn whose mystery and character captivate you and keep you glued to the pages. I love that. So we've got teenage parents, we've got Zach and we've got Tallulah, and they are getting a night off, and that's the night when they disappear. And about a year later, Sophie, a detective, turns up a clue, and as Laura says, it's very signposted, like dig here. So that's what she does. And this story about why they disappeared, who did what, is slowly revealed as we follow. There are 3 timelines. You've got Tallulah's timeline leading up to the night. You've got Tallulah's mum, Kim, I think she said, who talks about the aftermath, and then you've got the timeline of Sophie, who's a detective a year later, and how she unravels this whole plot. As Laura said, she said the writing was very to the point, the storyline was beautifully structured, there's plenty of drama, plenty of mystery, and plenty of characters that we become very attached to. And it's really for anybody who wants a good quality mystery but isn't really there for the high adrenaline. It's not heart palpitating or anything. You're going, oh my God, don't give me this because I can't cope with it. You can. It's got everything in it, and really keeps you wondering all the way through. A nice little thriller which has been widely endorsed and is getting a lot of buzz. So give that one a go. Another one up that I didn't read either. Everybody fought about this one, so I now have it on my to be read pile, but it has been read by Laura's dad. And he managed to, Laura managed to swipe it for him, which was wonderful. Now we're on. Look, Chris Hammer, he's already done 3 with Martin Scarsden, and they were wonderful rural investigative stories, and I thoroughly enjoyed all of those. This is standalone, so we're not in the same story of Martin Scarsden, though there is some connection between Trust and this one, which is very nicely dovetailed. So there are new protagonists. We're in the Queensland-New South Wales border, and we have a rather gruesome murder. I won't tell you. I'll spare your more sensitive feelings. There is a murdered opal miner. He's murdered in a gruesome fashion in his own mine, and then there are a Sydney detective who comes down to investigate this, and he also teamed up with the local girl, Nell, I think her name is. So we have these 2 working together, and this is trademark Hammer. He brings you into a small community. He throws in a stranger, he throws in a mystery, and he lets you get attached to the town. You start making your team, you start buddying up with certain members, and then we have magnates, we have the influence of people who have money, and it becomes quite explosive. It's sort of like a pressure cooker. Laura's dad said about this, he said, Chris Hammer provides us with a fast-paced crime thriller that delivers an outback town, mining magnates, revenge and murder. If you mix in drugs, gambling, lust, and top that off with a cult, you have all the ingredients that lead to a gripping finale. The pages almost turn for you. You can't say it better than that, can you? So that's one I'll be putting aside for when I have some time. No, I'm not going to laugh. Ha 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 ha. That comes from Alan and Unwin. Next one up. Now these are the ones where I've had to do a bit of thinking and a bit of reading and thinking and reading and thinking and work out what I think about everything. And I could write essays, not that I'm going to, on these. Bodies of Light, Jennifer Down from Text. Now she's already written what I've read as Pulse Points, which are short stories where she explores, extremities of what we can put up with and what we sort of intensities of relationships, of endurance. She's doing it again. This is Oz fiction. It is set between suburban Melbourne, and there's a bit of time spent in New Zealand and some time spent in the United States. And we have a young woman, Maggie. She's also called Holly. So there is a sort of a schism in her life, and I suppose a lot of Down's writing is looking at these breaks in the unity of your identity. That's what she's really interested in, and what breaks us up, or and how we sort of can piece ourselves back together again. So we are reading a little bit, or quite intensely, I don't know why I said a little bit, it's quite intensely trauma-based, because Maggie, as a young child, is deprived of both parents, is molested when she's 4, she's molested again when she's 11, so it's this kind of unbearableness that she's interested in. Despite this, and maybe this is what would, why I would say don't look at this novel thinking, oh, it's going to be all bleak and awful and all of that. It's not about resilience, it's really how, maybe through her own neediness, she attaches herself, often romantically or sexually, to people, but she just loves, she gives all the time, and it's an astonishing thing for someone who's been so knocked about by life. And Down writes this with sort of, I suppose, it bristles with the uncomfortableness of the edges of what this poor woman can bear. And it's blistering, her prose. I mean, she's beautiful detail, and I think this is what kind of carries that story, is that you find you're recognising places in parts of southeastern Melbourne, and you're recognising a lifestyle, and you're allowed to rejoice at times when things go well for her, but you still kind of have this impending doom. She has one very lovely marriage, but then things go wrong, and there are babies who don't survive. There is a very lovely relationship when she's doing her final exams, and she's in foster care, because she's in and out of foster care and institutions, and it's all written with enough distance for us to be preserved, because it could be harrowing if she weren't such a very, very good writer. And she is, boy oh boy, she is. But there's a lovely relationship with the foster carer, Judith, who, has seen it all, and even when our main character Maggie's being a little bit sort of bit of a baggage, really, and doesn't want to do her homework, she gets it into her head, just get your schooling, and gives her a sense of values, because no one's going to replace the parents that she's lost. It is very lovely. It's very much about the attachments we make, and then at some point in the book she manages, because her babies don't, or her, there are a couple of issues with that. Their finger is pointed at her for either negligence or worse, and she runs. And this is probably, she's permanently on the run. There's nothing that lets her ground herself. She's moved, and then she runs. She gets to the States, and this is where she becomes Holly. But a voice from her past looks her up on, she stages kind of a disappearance that would explain, that how she could get away. It makes it look like she's committed suicide. But their voice from the past gets out and gets in touch, and eventually this is the one person who can kind of see her. He's from the foster home, one of the foster homes, and there are some very beautiful and redemptive moments in this story. Look, it's lifted out of the potential for being very bleak and a bit sort of, I suppose, you're lying in the gutter but you're looking at the stars. There's a little bit of that in it. Tremendous read. So absolutely one for your awards for next year, and I'd keep an eye on this woman. Lovely book. Next one, lovely, difficult, but superb writing. Another one that's difficult and has superb writing. Boy, oh boy, Emily Bitto from Alan, and this is Alan and Unwin. I'm not happy it is Alan and Unwin, of course it is. Oh my goodness gracious me. Now, I read and loved The Strays, and I think I've waxed lyrical to several of you about that. This one is very different, so we have a completely different register. And she does something extraordinary. I mean, I was reading this and part of me didn't want to be reading it, and I just couldn't stop. So I think that says something a little bit. I had that with Jennifer Down as well, but it's you're hooked in by by the writing, and partly because the storyline, you just want to know what's she doing. It's astonishing. It's really powerful, and it'll give you a huge amount to think about. So we're in the US. We have a young boy, Will, who's left Australia, a bad breakup. It's all about the conflicts. He's got a version of his family history, he's got a version of this breakup, and he wants to forget it all, do the road trip, go to the States. He's kind of looking for oblivion. He comes to the States, he comes to New York, and he gets everything he wants. There's a bit of, recreational drug use, there's kind of the glamour, the thrill, the hedonism. There are a couple of parties, there's a couple of, hooking up with all the right or wrong people. And because he has hooked up with one of the wrong people, he then eventually has to scoot off to out into, oh crikey, one is Idaho, one's Ohio, can't ever remember. My US geography is appalling. I think it's Ohio, but I can't be sure. To, a chance connection with a girl who'd been in his school in Australia, who hankers after Australia, but has married a wonderful man, and they're living in this tiny little proud place, town. I'm fluffing that because I've read so many books, and I'm really more interested, less in those details, but in the grand themes that she's taking on. So you will excuse me if I haven't got all my details bang on. This young boy, Will, becomes, or it gets introduced to Wayne, who owns a private zoo full of exotic animals. We've got lions, we've got tigers, we've got panthers, we've got bears, we've got wolves. And this is where she writes that kind of rush of adrenaline. She writes this world of looking for the extreme, the excessive, the thing that gives me that rush. Because in fact, this Wayne is also a war veteran. So we have a very short insight into what that might have been like for him. He's kind of larger than life, and he kind of wants to give Will the wisdom of his, his years of life, and talks him out of a road trip and says, come and help me. But there's a part of the story we don't know. We know that the place is in trouble. We know that Wayne has a difficult relationship with his wife, and all of that might lead to, I don't want to tell you too much because it's a bit of it's a shocker. What Bitto is doing, and I think she pulls it off admirably because it is ambitious, is she's taking on the ideas of consumerism and capitalism in America, and she's taking on also the very male ideas of heroism, of ideologies, being able to dominate animals is, and to get the feeling that they're my babies. There's all of these sort of what a man thinks he is. There's a lot of violence in that. It's sort of suppressed, but it's an astonishing. She has an astonishing ability to insert herself into the skin of these different men, and to get us on board with. They're not particularly nice, but with Will's kind of assessment of himself in the long run. So that's what it's about. It's about getting him to a point where he's going to return to Australia at the end, possibly not being a hero. I don't know. It is based on a true story, so it gives it a different perspective, but I didn't realise that until the end, which is kind of brilliant of me. But boy, if you want to get your teeth into something super meaty, it'll knock your socks off. I have a lot of thinking and writing to do about it, I think, but yeah, go for it and buy it for everyone because, phew. Next one up is another Anthony Doerr. We've all read All the Light We Cannot See. Well, some of us have read it. This one's from Fourth Estate. Golly, another read where we're being asked to work. That's not a bad thing. It's an astonishingly good thing. It's a sprawling, monstrous, epic piece of writing that covers at least 3 timelines. One of them's kind of a wobbly timeline in its own right. We go back to Constantinople, so it's beautiful. It's glorious, glorious writing. A young girl in Constantinople who finds fragments of manuscripts and realizes that there are stories, and the nirvana is for wealthy, that she's kind of gets them from a ruined monastery is to find one of those little books that has a sort of miracle story in it. It's based on the story that she unearths scraps of is Diogenes' story of Cuckoo Land, where a shepherd, has heard of a magical, mysterious celestial city, and that he, above all things, he wants to end up there. But is it all as wonderful as it seems? And he transforms into a bird. It's the most glorious narrative arc that we have here, because all of the story of Diogenes is kind of reflected in the narratives that the three narratives that are written underneath it, if you like. So we have one in Constantinople in the 1450s, and there's a wonderful boy, Omar, who's born of the hare lip. He's kind of shunned. He has a wonderful way with animals, and these two are going to meet. Then we have a timeline in sort of modern day, almost contemporary. So we have a teacher stroke librarian, Zeno, who has been translating Diogenes and is putting on a play with local children in the local library. In this same library, at the opening, we have a young man, Seymour, who is sort of idealistic and is a little bit rigid in his, I think he's probably highly sensory, autistic sort of. He finds the world a very, very upsetting place, and he's seen the destruction. So it's a little book about the world we're living in, the climate. I mean, all of these books are, to a certain extent, dealing with this. And then we have a future intergalactic ship traveling to a new planet, because Earth is no longer viable, and life, and a girl in there, and there's a virtual library, and she finds scraps of this story, and she's able to look back on Earth and sort of travel around and see what it was all like. And all is nothing is ever what it seems. And the conclusion of this is how he ties these threads together is only magistral. He's just a genius of a storyteller. There are some very lovely moments. There are some surprises. There are one storyline where I wondered, had it been exploited fully, which was when our Zeno, they talk about his young life, and I wondered, as a young man in the war, why his love story had never come to a conclusion. But a writer should never necessarily fulfill all your expectations, I think, and he fulfilled every other one with this. I thought it was just a very, very, very splendid read. And it's one that you can sort of curl up with and lose yourself in three worlds. And I think you swap between the three with remarkable ease. They were all lovely. So do yourself the immense pleasure of that one. And last up, and she ties them all in very nicely, is this book. Now, I'd only ever read a sort of the first two chapters, and I didn't get a full reading copy, so I haven't read all of this, and I don't think it's something I want to read in one go. So it's Delia Falconer, who many of you might recognise as being a Walkley Award-winning essayist, and boy, she's at the, she's way, way, way up there. This comes to us from Scribner again, so we start and we end with Scribner. Falconer is taking on just about everything, and I love it. These are 13 essays, the most wonderful prologue. So if you think about what are signs and wonders, she transports us straight to this beginning of portent and what nature is telling us, omens and all of that. So she uses this idea and lets us look at our world, and this is her premise, is that the world is throwing up things for us to look at and marvel at, but it's also telling us that, well, perhaps some things aren't as wonderful as it should be, and these things are kind of hidden from us. And it's something that comes up again in Bitto, because of this idea of what the ideal life should be. So again, we're in Cloud Cuckoo land. The ideal, the journey, the kind of is the destination, is there a perfection? And she deals with the idea of glamour, hiding, you know, that this consumerism, you can have these things, all of the glitter is, or glister, hides the fact that the earth is in a very bad way. She fills it with anecdotes, fills it with sort of seemingly inconsequential musings, but it comes together as an immensely sort of human, tender. There's no moralizing. She's kind of clear-eyed. She explains her own distress, but it's a way of sort of peering into the things that are happening in the world and trying to see things for what they really are, and how things like, you know, the history of coal, what we thought about coal, what we think about coal, how it's presented to us, how the fact that paragraphs are no longer indented but are, you know, separated into blocks of text because our minds are now sort of being reconfigured, if you like, by digital and online versions of things. And she's not saying this is good or bad, she's just pointing all of this out. We all know it's bad. Come on, guys, we need the real thing. 13 essays. So she writes on birds, she writes on you know, the fires, a little bit on COVID. She writes again the paragraph. So you've got a very wide-ranging selection of topics, but in this prose with the lightness, the fluid clarity of thought, just a marvel. It's a wonder in itself. That was nicely said, wasn't it? Guys, I'm going to shut up now because, as I said, and I did preface this, and David said, don't go on too long. There's so much to talk about in all of these. And in a way, you know, what Delia Falconer is doing, Bitto is doing, and Anthony Doerr is doing, and Jennifer Down is doing, and of course Damien Cave is dealing with. My crime books don't necessarily go there because we need some blinking entertainment, but they are asking us to look at the world and look at our values and have a wee think about all of those, and they're all stunning reads. So how about treating yourself or treating someone else to a stunning read? That's it from me. I'm very tired now because I've done a lot of thinking. So I hope you have a nice think about those, and I'll, you know, I'm on the other end of the phone, so let me know if you want any of them. Bye-bye.